In 2008, the global financial system collapsed. Banks got bailed out with taxpayer money. Regular people lost their jobs, their homes, their savings. And in the middle of all that chaos, someone, or maybe a group of someones, decided enough was enough. They created Bitcoin, not as a get rich quick scheme, not as a fun tech experiment, but as a direct response to the corruption and failure of the traditional banking system. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of why Bitcoin exists, and I'm going to tell you why learning the history radicalized me. It might radicalize you too. Welcome back to Decoded with Laura. Last week, I told you my story, how I got into Bitcoin and crypto. This week, let's talk about Bitcoin's story, because you can't really understand what Bitcoin is until you understand why it was created in the first place. And fair warning, this is the story that changes people. This is what made me go from Bitcoin is weird internet money to, oh my God, this is actually important. Let's go back to 2008. If you were an adult then, you remember. If you weren't, you probably heard your parents talk about it. But let me paint the full picture. The housing market collapsed, but it didn't just happen randomly. Banks had been giving mortgages to people who couldn't afford them. We're talking about people with no income verification, no down payment, terrible credit. They called them ninja loans. No income, no job, no assets. Why would banks do this? Because they weren't keeping these risky loans. They were packaging thousands of them together, slicing them up, and selling them to investors as safe mortgage-backed securities. Rating agencies, who were supposed to be the watchdogs, gave these toxic packages AAA ratings, the highest possible rating, as safe as US Treasury bonds. Did you see the movie The Big Short? That is this story. It was fraud on a massive scale, and everyone was making money. The banks, the mortgage companies, the rating agencies, everyone except the people who would eventually lose everything. When housing prices stopped going up and people started defaulting on these mortgages, the whole house of cards collapsed. Lehman Brothers, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, went bankrupt. Bear Stearns collapsed. AIG, one of the largest insurance companies, was on the brink. The stock market lost half its value. Unemployment hit 10%. 9 million people lost their homes to foreclosure. I lived through this. I saw friends lose their jobs, neighbors lose their houses, people's entire retirement accounts cut in half overnight. And here's the part that made people really angry, the part that radicalized me. The banks that caused this mess, they got bailed out. The US government gave $700 billion in taxpayer money to save the banks. That's your money, my money. Money that came from people who were struggling to pay their mortgages, to keep their jobs, to feed their families. And what did the banks do with that money? They paid themselves bonuses. Executives at failed banks walked away with millions of dollars. Meanwhile, regular people got nothing. No bailout for families losing their homes. No safety net for people losing their jobs. If you couldn't pay your mortgage, you lost. Too bad. Should have been more responsible. But the banks, the ones who created this entire disaster through fraud and greed, they got rescued. The message was crystal clear. The system protects the banks, not the people. When banks lose, taxpayers cover it. When people lose, you're on your own. That's what I mean when I say this story radicalized me. Because once you see how the system really works, who it protects, and who it leaves behind, you can't unsee it. And here's the thing. The 2008 financial crisis was not an isolated incident. It's part of a bigger pattern that we're still seeing play out today. Look at what's happening right now. We're constantly learning about powerful people, billionaires, politicians, executive royals, who have done terrible things, corruption, fraud, crimes of the worst kind. And what happens to them? In most cases, nothing. Or they get a slap on the wrist while regular people would go to prison. It's rare that the people in power ever see the inside of a prison cell. When you're powerful enough, when you're connected enough, the rules just don't seem to apply to you. You get a bailout, you get a settlement. You get to keep your money, your reputation, your freedom. Meanwhile, regular people, you overdraft your account by $50, you get hit with fees. You miss a payment on your credit card, your credit is destroyed. You make a mistake on your taxes, and the IRS comes after you hard. Two different sets of rules, one for them, one for us. This is why movements like Bitcoin emerge, not because programmers are trying to get rich, though some did, but because people are tired of a system where accountability only flows downward, never up, where the powerful get away with things that would destroy anyone else's life. Satoshi saw what happened in 2008 and said, we need a system where the rules are the same for everyone, where powerful people can't just change the rules to benefit themselves, where transparency isn't optional. Bitcoin can't fix corruption. It can't fix human nature, but it can create a financial system where the rules are written in code, not controlled by people who benefit from breaking them. So, in the middle of all this chaos, October 31st, 2008 to be exact, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper, just 9 pages, titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. I'll link the actual paper in the description. It's surprisingly readable for a technical document. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's not as intimidating as you might think. To this day, we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. Could be one person, could be a group, could be a man or a woman or a team of developers. The identity is still a mystery, and honestly, that's kind of perfect because Bitcoin isn't about one person. It's about the idea. But here's what we do know. Satoshi was clearly paying attention to what was happening with the banks. The white paper wasn't just technical, it was ideological. On January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi created the very first block of the Bitcoin blockchain, called the Genesis block. And embedded in that block was a message, a headline from that day's London Times newspaper. Chancellor on the brink of a second bailout for banks. This wasn't random, it was a statement, a timestamp, proof of exactly when Bitcoin was born and why. Satoshi was saying, the banks are failing us again. They just got bailed out with $700 billion and now they need another bailout. We need an alternative. We need a system that doesn't rely on trusting banks and governments to do the right thing. So what exactly was Satoshi trying to solve? What problems does Bitcoin address? Problem 1, banks control your money. When you put money in a bank, it really is not yours anymore. The bank can freeze your account. The government can seize it. Look at the Canadian trucker strike. In 2008 even, people literally couldn't get their money out of their own bank because they were failing. They were limiting withdrawals and some banks just closed. Bitcoin's solution? You control your own money. No bank needed. No middleman. If you have the keys to your Bitcoin, it's yours. Period. No one can freeze it. No one can take it away. Problem 2, the government can print more money whenever they want. In 2008 and the years after, the Federal Reserve printed trillions of dollars to bail out the banks and stimulate the economy. It's called quantitative easing. What it really meant was they're creating money out of thin air. More dollars in circulation means each dollar is worth less. Your savings lose value. That's inflation. Your paycheck buys less. Your retirement account buys less. The purchasing power of your money slowly evaporates. Bitcoin's solution, there will ever only be 21 million Bitcoin. Ever. No one can print more. No government, no bank, no person. It's in the code. You can't change it. This is called digital scarcity. Problem 3, the system isn't transparent. Banks operate behind closed doors. Complex financial products that no one understands, credit default swaps, collateralized debt obligations, backroom deals, secret leverage ratios. You have to trust that they're doing the right thing. And in 2008, we learned that trust was misplaced. We learned that while no one's watching, corruption thrives. Bitcoin's solution? Everything is transparent. Every transaction is recorded on a public ledger that anyone can see. Anyone can verify it. Anyone can audit it. The rules are written in code, not controlled by people who might want to change them when it's convenient. Now, Bitcoin didn't come out of nowhere. Satoshi was building on ideas that had been around for years. There was a movement called cypherpunks. These are programmers and activists who believed in using cryptography to protect privacy and create freedom. They've been working on digital cash ideas since the 90s. They believed that privacy and financial freedom were fundamental rights. And they believed that technology, specifically cryptography, could protect those rights even when governments and corporations tried to take them away. Bitcoin is the culmination of decades of work by these people. Satoshi finally figured out how to make it work. On January 12, 2009, Satoshi sent the first Bitcoin transaction, 10 Bitcoin, to a computer programmer named Hal Finney. Hal was one of those early cypherpunks. He'd been working on digital cash ideas for years. When Satoshi released Bitcoin, Hal immediately understood what it could be. He downloaded the software and ran it, and became the first person to receive Bitcoin. That first transaction was historic. It proved the system worked. Two people sending money to each other without a bank, without permission, without a middleman. Just two computers talking to each other. Hal Finney passed away in 2014, but before he died, he wrote about Bitcoin. He said he thought it could become the payment system of the world, and he was one of the first people to see it. When I first found out about Bitcoin in 2013, I didn't get it. It seemed like nerd money, internet funny money. Why would anyone care? But when I started learning more about the 2008 crisis, really learning about it, not just the banks failed, but how they failed and who paid the price. I learned about the bailouts. I learned about quantitative easing. I learned about how the Federal Reserve can just create money to save the institutions that it wants to save, while regular people lose their homes and their savings. And I realized the system is rigged. Not in a conspiracy theory way, in a very obvious, right in front of your face way. The rules benefit the people in power and everyone else gets screwed. Bitcoin was created in response to that, as an alternative, as a way to opt out of a system that doesn't serve you. Now, will this radicalize you? Maybe not. Maybe you'll hear this story and think, yeah, but the system still works for me, and that's fine. But for me, once I understood why Bitcoin was created, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't just dismiss it as internet money, because it represents something bigger. The idea that we don't have to accept a broken system just because it's the only one we've ever known. Now, here's where it gets complicated, and I want to address this because it is confusing. Today, billionaires are buying Bitcoin. Bankers are buying Bitcoin. Hedge funds are buying Bitcoin. The very institutions Bitcoin was created to circumvent are now investing in it. Is that hypocritical? Kind of. Does it change what Bitcoin is? No. Bitcoin was created for everyday people. It was created to give regular people the same financial power and freedom that banks and governments have. The ability to send money without permission. The ability to save money that can't be inflated away. Bitcoin is open to everyone. That's the point. You don't need permission. You don't need to be approved. Billionaires can buy it. So can you. The code doesn't care who you are. The fact that powerful people are now adopting Bitcoin doesn't change its purpose. It actually proves the point. Even they recognize the current system has problems. Bitcoin was designed for the people. Now that billionaires have realized it has value, that doesn't take it away from us. If anything, it validates what early believers already knew. Here's why understanding history matters. Bitcoin wasn't created to make people rich. It wasn't invented by a corporation trying to sell you something. It was created by someone who was fed up with a corrupt, failing system that protects the powerful and leaves everyone else behind. When you hear people say, Bitcoin fixes this, this is what they mean. The problems that caused the 2008 crisis, the bank bailouts, the money printing, the lack of transparency, the two-tier justice system, Bitcoin was designed specifically to address them. Now, does it solve everything? No. It's not the solution to human greed. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But you can't understand what it is until you understand why it was created. Now that you know why it was created, we're going to talk about what Bitcoin actually is next week. How does it work? What is a blockchain? What makes it different from dollars or euros? I promise, no finance or coding degree required. We're going to break it down in plain English. If you're enjoying this series, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and let me know. Does learning this history change how you see Bitcoin? Did you live through the 2008 financial crisis? How did it affect you or your family? Are there any topics from today's video that you want to dive deeper into? And if you want to read Satoshi's original white paper, it's linked in the description. It's only 9 pages and surprisingly readable. Thanks for being here. I'm Laura, and I'll see you next week.